Good evening, everybody, and welcome to This is Africa. Salam, Sanbonani, Namaste, Molweni, Vanakam, Koyanand, and Hetepo. It's a beautiful Saturday night across South Africa, and I hope everybody is doing well. Welcome to this edition of This is Africa with your host, Shabnam Palesa Mohamed, produced and presented for STM Media. We've got a jam-packed, informative, and empowering show for you as usual. First up, we have Kesin Raman, and he is a parent as well as a mediator, talking to us about parental alienation and the mental impact on children and families who are affected. If you haven't heard what parental alienation is, chances are you could be going through it. Find out what's going on, where you can find support, and how South Africa deals with what is a child abuse and domestic violence issue. Kesin will be followed by Ebrahim Shaik. He's a community activist in the Ugu area where there is still no water. My understanding is that this situation is going on. It's a human rights violation since December at least last year. Who is to blame? How can we support this community? Ibrahim will give us the breakdown. And then in the final segment of our show, we're in conversation with Nazir Emam, with Imam Mansoor, who is the NFP's parliamentarian for the Health Portfolio Committee, as well as Barend, who is a researcher with AfriForum, talking to us about why we need to unite for vitamin I, remember the censorship, as well as against secret V deals, for which Big Pharma is trying to hold us responsible for any injuries caused. Very interesting show coming up, so tune in. But before we even begin, make sure that you are sharing this program across all of your platforms, right? So hit that share button if you are on Facebook, copy the link across to your chat groups, your email. And if we have any issues during the course of the show with censorship, as we normally experience, you are welcome to share the program or to watch the program on YouTube and to share it across all platforms. Of course, we'll be sharing the link after the show so that you will be able to share it with more of your contacts. So it's a very interactive show, and we will be encouraging your questions and your comments, your thoughts, your ideas, and some very important issues that are affecting us in South Africa and on the African continent. I think you're going to enjoy it. It's very engaging. Make sure you ask your questions, especially of in the last segment of Nazir Ahmed Sheikh Imam, as well as Barend Ace on the vitamin I versus the vax issue. And we're waiting for our guest to join us, Kesin Raman, to talk to us about parental alienation, which basically is when a child is separated from a parent during a separation of the parents or a divorce of the parents. One party becomes bitter and doesn't want to allow the other parent access to the child. And of course, it leads to years of litigation and trauma, and it's something that has to be addressed in our country. All right, Kesin is ready to join us. And let's add him to the studio. Welcome, Kesin Raman, to This is Africa.
Hi, Shabnam. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us today. I know you're one of the experts and activists in this area of parental alienation. Very serious issue. And as I was saying to our audience, it is a matter of child abuse for the child who's alienated. And for the parent who's alienated, it is an act of domestic violence. It explains so much about why society is the way it is, why children have mental health issues, why adults suffer with stress, why there's bullying going on in schools, etc. What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, apologies for dialing in late. My kids are up in Joburg, so I can only video call them within a certain time. So I had to speak to them first. Around parental alienation, I work with a couple of parents' rights and children's rights organizations, but one of the organizations I work with is the Durban Youth Council. And through that, and this is purely just kids, I haven't met their parents formally, you can see the issues that they deal with. A lot of them feel abandoned by one parent. And when you start talking to them, they actually don't know why. They only know what they've been told by one parent. And when you start unpacking the history or what's been going on with them, and we had a discussion around Human Rights Day with them, around their rights as children and what they're allowed to access after divorce and with the other parent. And these kids are flabbergasted because they don't know what happened. They believe they've been abandoned. And that leads to issues of drug abuse, um, promiscuity, and just generally bullying and falling into things that ordinarily they would not look at. Um, some of the stuff that I've heard from other dads that I've worked with, I mean, kids stealing parents' cars and disappearing, alcohol missing from homes. Um, Kids say, "Oh no, we're going to watch a movie," and then dad gets a call because mom's not available, and dad has to drive and fetch a kid from a police station or from an accident.
Very
It
serious issues. And of course, suicide is also one of those risk factors in children who are affected by alienation. Kesin, for people who don't understand what child parent alienation is and how it happens, can you take us briefly through that?
Okay, so I'm going to give you what I've sort of turned as my definition. It's the willful denial of a parent to a child, and in doing so, blocking that parent at any contact point, at any um, organization, blocking them from a school. It's a simple thing, but a school. The child then grows up believing that they've been abandoned, the other parent doesn't want them, the other parent doesn't care. Um, there's lots of definitions, but that's how I explain it best.
Very, very common. Where does your interest in this very much a human rights issue and campaign come from?
Okay, so for me personally, I'm 6 years into this battle. Um, I'm started in 2015, divorce, running away. What people start with is a lot of protection orders and nonsense, not just against the parent being targeted, but the extended family as well. In my matter, it was my mother that was targeted with a protection order, which later had to be withdrawn because there was no merit. And therein starts the fact that the courts will issue a protection order with no basis whatsoever. Um, I've been High Court, Magic Court, Family Advocate, Durban and Joburg. Um, and it's my kids. And the more I got into it with my kids and fighting and sharing this story with people that I know, um, I found it was an all too common occurrence. And not just in the Indian community. Any race, there's no prejudice. You will find yourself being alienated and targeted. Um,
Mm.
and again, the bias in the courts is my specific interest in this matter.
So tell us about that, Kirsten. What is the situation like in South Africa? What are the factors that are involved in allowing this human rights crisis in family law to continue?
Sadly, our law says 50-50 is available and open to parents. However, the moment you get into an adversarial approach, so you start getting into court, I'm not blaming all lawyers because I have worked with some pretty decent ones. However, it becomes a who needs to win and who's got the most money. And then the courts take over. Courts have generally, and again, I'm generalizing because the matters I deal with, we've seen a huge mother bias right down from the clerk at family court to the magistrates, the prosecutors, the high court judges, family advocates. I mean, I've got documentation that pertains to my matter and other matters where family advocate is blatantly stating that they are biased. I've gone as far as the NPA. I've gone as far as family advocate head office in Gauteng, Pretoria, and they will not do anything. They favor mothers, and it's based on old and outdated practices where the mother was always, it was what the Maternal Preference Act, I think it's called, that was repealed several years ago. So courts are perpetuating this. And obviously, the more money people spend, the more money people need to make.
And a lot of money is spent on, I know, social workers and psychologists, and it's just this endless cycle until most people actually end up bankrupt. Let's say hello to Saskia Langeveld, Benedicta Bergman. Saskia has a comment for us. Feelings of abandonment have wide-reaching issues. It stays with children for the rest of their lives, and it comes out eventually that the abandonment was created by someone so close to you. It also creates mistrust in those children. Exactly that, Saskia. A very, very valuable comment. So from there, let's talk about mental health then, Kesin. What is the mental health impact on children, on parents, and on extended families?
So again, I speak from my personal experience. I'm going to draw on some of the other matters that I've dealt with. You get a father, and I'm speaking specifically as a father, who's targeted and alienated. But then the knock-on effect is the grandparents, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins. I mean, can you imagine growing up without your cousins, not knowing them? You bump into them on the street and you don't know who they are. Um, so 10 years down the line, the child's been alienated, doesn't know the family. What about happens if they start dating a relative down the line? That mental health, that shame, that will affect a child, a young adult, a teenager for the rest of their lives. The feeling abandoned. I mean, no child should ever feel like someone they love has abandoned them. And often this is been made to seem like that's what happened, and the child blames themselves. And children don't often speak about it to other people because they feel they have no one to talk to. It
Mm-hmm.
eats away at them. You see it in schoolwork. You see it in social interactions. Um, there's no aspect of their life that is not affected. And sadly, the social workers that are the ones that are supposed to protect them and recognize these traits often brush it off or side with mom, and then it becomes dad's not good for baby. He must stay out of the way. We've got matters
Right.
where social workers have gone in and interfered in schools where they have no authority, but they've given documentation to a school to remove children. The child feels that dad's not fighting, because, but dad doesn't know what's going on and he's denied everything. Child gets upset and acts out.
Absolutely. But isn't this an argument for co-parenting? I mean, shouldn't that be the standard in our law that both parents co-parent? You start off with a 50% position and you work it out from there. There are many creative ways to work out parenting plans instead of, alienating and fighting. Let's work out a parenting plan that works. Isn't co-parenting should be
That
the standard in our law and in
it
our
should
thinking?
be. It's available in our law, but it's not practiced because there's more money in the adversarial approach of one parent against the other. I personally have spent hundreds of thousands in court. I've got dads that have spent almost 1 million. There are moms that are also alienated. I will not discount that fact, but the vast majority are dads. So when we get to family advocate, I mean, and I've been to the Durban Family Advocate's office, I think at least 5 times in the last 6 years. I've had senior family advocates tell me to my face that it's best for a child to be with mom. So if the people that are meant to be promoting a co-parenting relationship either don't have the skills or don't want to embrace this new, according to them, newfound co-parenting system, then we are never ever going to get that. And sadly, the children are the ones that suffer. We've tried everything to do co-parenting and put it in there. We've done parenting plans for people. It gets to court, and then the judge says, but the children belong with their mom. And boom, we're gone. There's nothing you can do. I've appealed personally with a lawyer and with myself, and boom, you get nothing. I have a quote which was taken back, but it was a high court judge that said the first way a father shows love to his children is financially. Now, you
Wow.
can't even take that further because nobody will even look at what you want to say. It's in a transcript, it's available, but no one takes it seriously. And
But
I,
it's
I
such a
think the other
setup,
part of it,
Kirsten, isn't it? Isn't it a setup then? Because then it's endless litigation, right? Instead of parents, even when you get married or you get together to say, look, if this doesn't work out, this is going to be our parenting arrangement. We're not going to waste money litigating. when we can invest that money in our child, but the system is set up for endless litigation.
Yes. Then once they start getting into that, then they start talking about the sort of the carrot that they dangle is, oh, you need money to raise this child, and then you must now start talking about maintenance. And it's the case of, oh, the lifestyle of the child before the divorce must be maintained. Fair enough. Two incomes in one household, you can have a good life. Modern times, economy is not good, and now we're sitting with what? Two households that need to run. They both need to look after the children, but you've got two bonds. You've got extra expenses. It cannot be done. And that's when they say, oh no, primary residence stays with mom, dad must pay maintenance, the lifestyle must be maintained. So dad goes from living in a decent area with his family, mom as well. Mom keeps the house, dad has to move into a little flat. Then it's, oh no, dad can't take the kids to the flat because it's not safe. There's only one room, or it's too small, or the area is not good. So you see, at every point, like you said, it's stacked against one parent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, certainly. And the economy getting even worse, what makes sense is co-parenting. So when the child is with dad, dad looks after child. When the child is with mom, mom looks after child as far as is possible. But the system is completely rigged. Why would you, I know you're a mediator as well. Why would you recommend mediation over litigation?
First and foremost, it's a non-adversarial approach. You can sit down and you can have a conversation. And you know what? If you're adult enough, you guys chose to go into a marriage, you choose to leave a marriage, do it amicably. Why does there always need to be an ugly side to it? Yes, there are reasons that people divorce, and we won't get into all of that. But if you're talking about your kids, you should both want the same, the best that both of you can provide. Mediation is brands and cents, it's far cheaper, can be done quicker, and if it's done properly, you can be done in a few days, not years that high court takes. And the other way to do it is that it's a conversation. So you sit down, you have a chat. How I do it, I generally do it over a cup of coffee, both parties, and we talk about everything. Again, I'm not there to make a decision for you. I'm just there to guide and manage the conversation so it doesn't get ugly, and we keep coming back to what's best for the child.
Absolutely agree with you. Another comment here from Saskia Langefeld. Let's just pop that up there. It's another very important comment there from Saskia. And this is, I believe egos are very much to play here. The greatest gift you can give your children is your time. Presence over present. I believe children are happier in two happy homes than one unhappy home, but parents need to grow up. Such an important point about
Absolutely.
egos. And we've got about 2 minutes to go before the next interview, Kesin. So I want to ask you this: what is the way forward? I mean, that is ultimately the question that we keep asking ourselves. What is the way forward to stop this alienation, abuse, this domestic violence? What is the way forward?
We need some changes to the way our laws enforced. Um, we have law for a reason. We have court orders for a reason, apparently. I have very seldom seen an access order enforced. I personally have an access order that states I'm supposed to see my kids every day. My ex relocated without my permission, but a year and a half later, I still don't see my kids. I've been as far as the NPA with this. They refuse to enforce the order. Family advocate in Durban has recommended that they will not recommend enforcement because she's the mother. I've got documentation to back it up. We can't expect fathers to be involved or any parent to be jointly involved when they are constantly denied. So enforcement of orders needs to happen, and we need to revert to 50-50 as default. Unless there's
Of course, and
serious issues.
we can't call dads deadbeat dads and then not let them be parents. That makes no sense. Very quickly, last question. I know that the South African Coalition for Child Access Rights is planning a
Yes,
conference beginning in May up till the 16th of June. Really exciting. It's South Africa's first child
yes.
alienation access conference. Tell us a bit more about this conference and where we can find out more.
Okay, so there is a website that will be up. We'll be sharing it on social media. The conference is essentially to promote co-parenting, and it's just that: two parents, two happy homes. Let the child be happy. We want to figure out ways to do it. We want to talk about mediation and how you can access it and how you can stay out of court and out of huge financial implications. You need to follow, Shabnam, there's lots of information we're going to be sharing over the next few days, few weeks. Please watch social media. The website will send out soon, but there's a lot of information. Speak to your children's rights groups, because we're going to be sharing it to all of them.
Excellent. Last two comments. Benedicta Bergman, adults need to act as adults and stop using their children as bait in court. Saskia Langefeld says, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Raman. Keep on fighting. Never give up. Many parents, mothers, and fathers need you. Thank you very much for those comments from all of our audience and our guests. Kesin Raman, thank you for joining us today. Kesin Raman is an alienated parent, but he is also a child rights activist and a mediator. We look forward to having you again soon, and all of the best with your journey.
All right. Thank you for your time. Take care.
Thank you, Kesin. Bye-bye. All right. So we've been talking to Kesin Raman there, and next up we'll be in conversation with Ebrahim Shaik. And he is a community activist in the Ugu area. And he's going to tell us what's going on with the water crisis, the ongoing water crisis, of course. We're very interested in knowing what's going on, who is to blame for why communities don't have water for months, and how can we support them. Ebrahim Shaik, welcome to This Is Africa.
Hi, thank you, Shabnam. Always good to be with you, working with you on these projects. Yes, indeed, there's a lot going on the South Coast, but I really appreciate you putting me on the show today.
You are most welcome. I know you've been very, very busy on the ground trying to help people with what is a basic human right, the right to water. What is the situation right now in Ugu and surrounds, Ebrahim?
Well, the situation is no different now than it's been for the last 2-3 years. It's actually intensified over the last 3 months, since about December. But the situation is we don't have water, and then we have intermittent water supply. So like, for example, we haven't had water for about 60 days. And in that 60 days, we were connected for about 10 days. We did get water last week for about 4 days, and we disconnected. As I'm speaking to you right now, certain parts in Hibadeen don't have water. They have not identified where the pipe has burst, what reservoir is not being pumped, what pump is broken, what electrical components broken. Nobody knows what's the problem. So if you don't know what the problem is, you can't really fix it.
No one knows. How does no one know what the problem is? Surely it's their job to know what's going on with the water supply.
Well, my understanding, and I'm learning as I'm going along as well, a lot about water pumps and reticulation systems and how reservoir and pipeline infrastructures, and I'm sure I'm going to get my honors by the end of this, but my understanding is that the pump's supposed to have sensors on them that when the pump stops working, then it will notify somebody at the municipality, maybe a technical 24-hour lookout team. We don't know if there is a 24-hour lookout team to even respond to the signals. We don't know if these sensors have been put onto new motors that come in. Remember, if a pump has been replaced, the technician has to replace the sensor with the pump. And if you don't know that, if you're some unqualified plumber, you're just going to stick a pump in there, start it up, and as soon as it's working, jump in your van and go back home, and then 2 or 3 hours later, the pump's not working. So there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of investigation. Are the plumbers qualified? Does the municipality have the necessary infrastructure that even if the plumbers qualified, and even if the sensors are on the pump, are there people employed to sit in this 24-hour control room and monitor these pumps? And that's just talking about the pumps. There's a lot of unknown just about the pumps. When you start talking about the reservoirs, I've sent you videos and pictures of the reservoirs. There are reservoirs that will fill up to 50%, and then they start leaking because somebody has either cracked it deliberately, which is now we're going into the territory of sabotage, or because of old aging infrastructure, the reservoir's cracked and nobody's taken the time to fix it. Or there's another possibility. So there was a contract and a tender given out to fix the reservoir. Money's been handed out, and nobody took the time to fix it. That person's now gallivant to do the money. So it's a South African story. How do we get to the bottom of this? It's going to be a long road to get to the problem, because for me, once you identify the problem, then you can fix it. And as I'm pointing out to you, we don't know whether if it's census, not enough staff at Ugu municipality, aging infrastructure, sabotage, what's going on. But I can tell you this much, Shabnam. The one thing has been clear from monitoring in the last 3 months is that it's leaning more towards sabotage, and other, I can't mention the name on this station, other entities are busy investigating this. There seems to be a political motive behind this. New political parties have emerged on the South Coast. I'm not sure if you can give me permission to mention the names, but I'm not, because I just don't want to talk about it and make it that. But there's all these possibilities that are really making the people of Hebridean and the South Coast area suffer. And unfortunately, Shabnam, you know, this is how the world works, is that these new political parties, to score points, will deliberately sabotage a water pipe to score brownie points, and then come with a van on a Sunday and give you water in a 5-liter container, which they've secured from big donations, either to business people or whatever. So what is the problem? Nobody knows what the problem is. It's quite across the board.
Well, I was going to ask you who benefits from the situation, but I think it's increasingly clear, because every time you need to fix a problem, there's a service provider that makes money. So there's a profit in making sure that the system is never working properly. And if it is, the service providers lose out. And then, of course, there's the political dynamics, which you've just spoken about, and which we need to keep a very close eye on. Because any political party who is an accomplice to the suffering of the people in that community is not a political party that can be trusted. Ebrahim, what is the physical and mental health impact on the people living in the community?
People have become hopeless and helpless. I mean, we've got people in the rural areas, Shabnam. You must know they have yet to see true freedom in the country. They're still waiting for this democracy. They're still waiting to go into the bedroom and put a switch on, like how you and I do, and get electricity in the home. They're still waiting for a water tap to be installed in the home. What they have in the last 25 years is a pipe coming in from the municipality to a central area, and they have to go there with the buckets and get this water. And this is the so-called democracy that this is the benefits of the democracy that they've fought so hard for and voted for, and it's not being delivered. So when you talk about psychological impact, remember we're talking about a 300-year psychological impact. How is this impacted on people who have already been through apartheid, have already fought for their freedom? They fought for it, and 25 years later, all they have is a pipe coming to a central area that they still got to carry heavy buckets on their head. Now, I'm going to touch on something very sensitive here, but I have to, because I'm here to highlight the situation of the poorest of poor. I met an old lady, she's about 72 years old, in the rural areas, and she gets a government grant of about 1,600. She has to pay a little boy in the community when he comes from school 10 Rand to take a bucket to the central point where the water pipe is, and then bring the buckets of water home. Now, you know how quickly you can use a bucket of water. One bucket of water is maybe 2 or 3 flushes in the toilet, maybe 2 washing. I mean, they still got to wash clothes. So I'm referring to psychological impact. Before we even had that pipe was like enough, it was just enough. It was already a burden, it was already a problem, it was already a challenge for the elderly. School would come, children would come home from school, and instead of doing homework or even running around with your friends, you're carrying buckets of water for granny, because granny can't make it anymore. Where's mom and dad? They plowing the fields in the background. So it is the same old pain and suffering in the rural areas. I saw it last week, it broke my heart. And now that one pipe coming to now this situation, the one pipe that they even had a little bit of relief from, you know, even that situation was so difficult after 25 years. Now, even that's been taken away from them. So can you imagine now, Okoko is sitting at home. She's sitting at home. She doesn't have water. She's relying on this truck to go by from Ugu municipality, or maybe a humanitarian person will bring it in, like we've been bringing it from the private sector. She's sitting now. She doesn't even have that facility where she can send the child with the 10 rand, go and bring me some water. There's no water. Imagine Goko
Oh
now
my
in the
God.
70s, in the 80s. She's been through apartheid. She's fought, seen her so-called democracy in 1994. She was hoping for the best. She got a little pipe, a little bit of water, and now even that's been taken away. She's gone back 30 years, in my opinion. She's
Hmm.
devastated. She's crying, literally crying tears to me. She's saying, you know what? I'm not voting for anybody this year. All the councillors are useless, and everybody, she appeals. She says, please do something about the water. They are crying tears for water, not at the taps like how you and I have in our kitchens and our bathroom. They're crying for a central a community water, just to run water there. And this is where I'm coming in, and this is who I'm fighting for, you know?
I tell you, that's very intense and very emotional and painful. A couple of comments here from our guest, Saskia Langeveld. Welcome, Mr. Sheikh. We have a holiday home in Uvongo, so this discussion is so relevant to us. Um, Saskia Langeveld says, unacceptable. Water is a basic human right. And then we've got Benedicta Bergman, the looting of funds in municipalities, hence no maintenance. Right? That's what's going on. Saskia replying to say, yeah, that is exactly it. This is what our people are actually suffering through, and one can imagine, it's physical trauma, it's emotional distress, as well as it takes a toll on physical health. And we're supposed to be in the the coronavirus time, and people are told to wash your hands, but you don't even have water to go to the toilet, to cook your food, to have a bath. So whatever impact it has on your health actually makes no difference to those who pretend to care about people, especially when it comes to voting time. What has the response been like from government as opposed to civil society that is, stepping in and trying to help?
I've been knocking on doors trying to get answers. The media has been phoning me in the last 3 or 4 weeks as I've been trying to highlight the situation here. And obviously, when the media contacts me, they have to also contact Ugu and get their version of the story. They can't just take mine. And is everybody that I've dealt with now, all the other media outlets, nobody's been able to get answers. Now imagine if the media is knocking and phoning and they're not getting answers, we don't stand much of a chance. That's why I keep saying we don't even know what the problem is. We go into meetings with the mayor, and the mayor says, okay, we'll look into it and revert. They send you a document saying, we've acknowledged the problem, we are aware of the problem, we're dealing with the problem. But it's saying a lot, yet saying nothing, because these meetings and this paperwork and this paper trail that's been created to say people are attending to the problem is not helping Ugoko in the backyard from where we're living. Just 2 kilometers away from a blue flag status beach. Hibadin is a blue flag status. It's an international destination. 2 kilometers away from this beach, I've got people who are still waiting for emancipation. They're waiting for drops of water. And I take it to them, and Ugu comes with the trucks. They're investing 160,000 rand a day with the trucks. Now, imagine 160,000 rand a day bringing trucks to Ugogo. Now, here's something that the municipality has forgotten about and not taken into consideration. You want to send a truck to an area once a week to feed the people with, or to give them their water for that week or their ration. Now, if you're an old lady in an old little hut with broken doors and broken windows, and you're surviving on literally the government handout and maybe whatever little the kids give you, how many buckets can you buy that when the truck does eventually get to your doorstep, you can say, right, for this week, I need 10 buckets or 20 buckets, and then I need to fill up with these trucks and keep it. So what's happening? Ugogo has only got 4 buckets. Ugogo goes there with a 4 bucket shame. She takes a 2 or 3 days ration, and then she sits and she waits for municipality for another 7, 8, 9, 10 days to deliver. And the next time you see the truck may drive right past you. Why? Because they didn't cover areas that they covered last week. So one truck doing a trip every now and then is not helping the people, but the municipality says this is what they're doing. They recently had an inspection of about 20 of these water tankers. Half of them don't work. The pumps are not working. The tanks itself are leaking. And I'm going to say it like it is. Somebody's making money from this. Somebody is making money from 160,000 rand a day. We live so close to a river, and listen to this. We live next to a river called Amzumbi River, right? It is a huge river with plenty of water. It's easier for me to get water from the river than to get from the municipality at this stage. Municipality will invest money in trucks and short to medium term solutions, get the same
Solutions.
amount of money if you build a pump house on that river, connect it to the main line, problem solved. At least half the area will have water. But they refuse. They're hauling water in from almost 80 to 90 kilometers away.
Well, it looks like that's what the community needs to do themselves. Here's Saskia Langeveld providing some details so you can send your complaints to the Ugu municipality. And she says, call to action. Let's all of us start screaming about this. This is not acceptable. Here's a comment from Kapil Ramasur. The government is doing its hardest to push people over the edge. I'm almost thinking like, they want that people in that area to move out of that area. And maybe that's why they're making the situation completely horrendous. And here's another comment from Benedicta Bergman. People have no water, but your taxpayers' money must be put in a fund for injection injuries. Imagine the irony in that, right? If people are injured by injections, those companies that make the injections don't pay, we have to pay. But meanwhile, our people don't even have water. It's an absolutely insane situation. Such a good point there, Benedicta. How can people support the community? How is the community mobilizing, and how can people support?
Okay, this is where we come in now as a community. The first thing I've done in the last 3 months that I've been back home in Heberden. Firstly, I was born and brought up in Heberden. I moved to Maritzburg later on to pursue career. Now that I've come back home here, I've decided as a first course of action is to unite everybody. Because this town is a small town, we have what we call small town syndrome. Small town syndrome, everybody wants to be popular, everybody wants to be Mr. Important. So we got to break the challenges amongst these leaders. We have very capable leaders in the area, and I've identified these leaders. You've got a group called the South Coast Water Action Group who are taking Ugu to court. And they basically said, if Ugu does not deliver, they will fix the pipes, they will do the repairs on the dam, and then they will just bill Ugu, and the court can actually order Ugu to pay the funds out. So I've joined forces with that group because I do believe that getting the attorneys involved and a court case has to be something that we have to take as action, because you got short-term goals, medium-term goals, and long-term goals. The long-term goals is to fix this problem once and for all. And if Ugu is going to continue supplying water, they better get their act together, because this is what the South Coast Water Action Campaign Group is saying. They've given them an ultimatum actually 2 weeks ago. They said, if you guys don't get your act together by this certain Friday, we're going to court. And now the dossier is being prepared. The non-profit is being registered. They're setting up an infrastructure. And we're going to take this formally with Ugu and basically tell them, listen, we've had enough. So as far as the immediate need is concerned, I'm reaching out to people, business people, private individuals, people that I know, to give me the water so that I can satisfy immediate need. And they've sent trucks out from as far as Tongaat, Verulam, Peter Maritzburg. People that my business colleagues that I know have sent out the trucks. So there's this immediate need of delivering water right now and as often as we can. And then there's a long-term goal of joining forces with South Coast Water Action Group. Hilton, Mr. Hilton is leading that campaign. We've joined forces with him, and we're trying to move that forward so we can get a long-term solution. And coming back to the point, the challenge in Heberden is to get the business sector, the private sector, and even the rural informal sector, whom I represent, to all unite under one umbrella and put sufficient force. And I think I've made huge progress in that area, leaps and bounds. Some people didn't like me because I was too outspoken. I've managed to come to them saying, listen, we're all on the same page. We're all fighting for the same goal. I'm not here for name and fame. Let's unite our forces. And we're doing that, and we're reaching consensus generally, because ultimately, Shabnam, you know this job, it's a thankless job, and we have to do what we can for the people of Heberden and South Coast. And if I get this formula right in uniting leadership as the first step, you know, that we can't solve a problem if 5 of us are pulling in 5 different directions. If I've got Hilton saying, no, Sheikh, If Hilton wants to go to court and I don't support Hilton, and then if I want to do a protest demonstration in the middle of town and Hilton doesn't support me, we are fighting for the same cause, but we're going to get nowhere. So the first step in this is to unite the leaders of
Absolutely.
the area. I'm pressing
Absolutely.
hard on
Ibrahim,
that.
we're going to have to leave it there. We're going to have to leave it
Right.
there because we've got another interview coming up on another very heavyweight topic. But a great comment here from Saskia Langeveld. We have a huge utility company. I'm going to ensure that our company starts contacting Ugu. We will deliver proper delivery. So make contact with Saskia Langeveld. She is the national coordinator for the Vitamin I campaign that is run by THJ. And of course, comments about tender fraud and a comment saying, Mr. Shaik, we need to unite. Thank you very much for your determination and your community activism. And we stand in solidarity with the community of Ugu. Thank you for joining us on This Is Africa.
Thank you, Shabnam. Have a good evening. Bye. Salam.
Thank you. Walaikum salam. All right. So that's been Ebrahim Shaik telling us what's shocking news, what's going on in the Ugu municipality. And certainly unity is the way to defeat the issues that communities are experiencing in our country. That is the only way. It is our unity that the system fears the most. Last comment there from Kapil Ramusel. Thank you, Mr. Shaik. All right. And in the last set of interviews for this edition of This Is Africa, we welcome into studio two people that are very well known in the South African political and activism space, particularly on the issue of vitamin I. It's the NFP's Ahmed Mansoor Sheikh Emam, and it's Barend Ace from AfriForum. Welcome to This Is Africa, gentlemen.
Thank you, Shabnam.
Thank you, Shabnam.
Thank you very much for spending some time with us this Saturday evening. Let's get straight into it. Share with us the most recent developments of significance in this campaign to roll out vitamin I. Let's start with Mr. Emam.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And also let me thank AfriForum and Mr. Barend for the role that they have played in fighting the fight to create an atmosphere or a conducive environment to ensure that ivermectin to some extent is rolled out. And I think that we have made some significant strides in terms of, first of all, I think giving enough exposure to the issue of ivermectin or vitamin I, as we
Mr. Emam, can I just ask you to pause there? You're going to have to use the word vitamin I, unfortunately, to avoid triggering the senses. Or
okay,
IVM.
Okay, we can do that. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, so like I said, thank you very much to AfriForum for the role that they have played and have come out and supported this call to ensure that, of course, vitamin I or IVM is made available to our people. We all know that SAPRA, the National Department of Health, has been ignoring this for a very long time, despite the fact that we have a healthcare in South Africa that is in crisis. So let me thank you, Mr. Barend, and your AfriForum, and all those, particularly Sari, for the role we have played in making ivermectin available. However, the fight still goes on, and we're hoping that we can get greater success in being able to combat the COVID-19, given the fact that we have other challenges in terms of in South Africa.
I just want to ask you a follow-on question before I turn to Mr. Ace there. What is the attitude in Parliament? Because you give them no space to operate. I mean, you are constantly at them on the issue of IVM. What is the attitude in Parliament?
Well, first of all, we had the National Department of Health do a presentation last week, and that was on the V's and the vaccines, of course. And I mean, myself particularly, interrogated the minister and wanted responses. Because what is different from what we knew 2 weeks ago and the about turn that SAPRA had actually made? And at this stage, coming at a cost of about 2 million rand, which is now going to be won by taxpayers, first of all, that we might have saved a lot of lives had we taken this decision to roll it out much earlier. And why did you have to wait for pressure from AfriForum and others? And there's no new evidence at this stage that has unfolded. So what was the about turn? Is it anything to do with the fact that we've already procured the vaccines? and so there's no dangers of cancellation in terms of vaccines in worldwide. And so it would appear that the minister, I must tell you, didn't even have the answers. I think he didn't even know what was going on. The minister actually went on to say that, no, it is still only allowed under Section 21. I don't know where he's got that from. He went on to saying that the World Health Organization still does not agree that IVM is actually good for combating COVID-19. And so that's why I asked him, but if that is the case, then what made you change your mind? And he couldn't give us that answer. So clearly, there is more to it than meets the eye.
Absolutely. And thank you for your robust work there in Parliament. Mr. Ace, share with us the most recent developments of significance in the campaign to roll out vitamin I. And if you're referring to the injections, you may call it the V or the injection.
Okay, Shabnam, thank you for the opportunity. I think, of course, locally, we had a big breakthrough with the court ruling. And the practical implications of that is that doctors can prescribe IVM to patients. And of course, patients can obtain compounded IVM without the Section 21 program. That is a major breakthrough locally. Internationally, IVM is also gaining some traction. And I saw over the weekend that All India Institute of Medical Sciences now also included IVM. And it's so ironic that we have to call it IVM, that they included it in the protocol for outpatient treatment. And I just had a frown on my face when I saw that they still in the let's call it the second phase treatment, they still include remdesivir. And remdesivir was actually indicated by the WHO as well, not actually making a difference. So it is such strange times that we are living in, but I honestly believe that we are gaining traction internationally. Our big task is actually now to inform people, to let people know about IVM. South Africa and Southern Africa, just South Africa as a country is a really large place. It's vast areas, and I think many people still do not know about IVM. Doctors do not know about IVM. Unfortunately, we know that we do not have massive issues with tropical diseases, so we do not know IVM for humans in South Africa. So I think our big task ahead is to actually inform people and inform doctors about IVM and the advantages that it can offer us in this massive fight to save lives and to help people to get healthier quicker.
Absolutely. A comment from Sharon Richter. Vitamin I is the only drug that will get you censored. That should tell you something. Thanks for that, Sharon. A follow-up for you there, Barend. We get approached regularly, Sahari, with people who are desperate to save the lives of their loved ones. And then they tell us, the doctor is not listening, or the hospital is not listening, or where are these compound pharmacies? So certainly there are some challenges. There are doctors who, yes, embrace IVM, and there are others who are hesitant. They're not sure. And then there's others who just refuse. In fact, we had a doctor threaten to abandon a patient after we'd mobilized on the request of the wife to assist us to advocate. So that certainly is a challenge. And then, of course, supply is a challenge in terms of our compound pharmacies, because that's, the route that people are legally allowed to obtain the medicine. What are your thoughts on that? The challenge of the hesitant, refusing doctors, and the challenge of sourcing from compound pharmacies?
Shabnam, actually, we do not really have a supply problem with the compounded ivermectin. It's more a problem of people not knowing. So, I can name a list of pharmacies that I know do have or will have compounded ivermectin. I can name Van Heerden's Apteek, Arinel, Pharma Value, some Spar pharmacies. I went to my local pharmacy and I asked them, listen, if I bring you a prescription, do you have compounded ivermectin available, or will you have it available? And they confirmed it to me. So I think people must just try a few pharmacies. If they speak to the first one and they cannot get compounded IVM there, they must just go to the next. Then the issue of the doctors, it is quite a challenge. And of course, the source of that challenge is actually the regulatory authorities that are not giving us, the let's call it the guidance that they are supposed to be giving. And I understand there's many risks. Of course, we have courageous medical practitioners that are really true to their oath and that are of course on own responsibility prescribing IVM for the treatment of COVID-19. But of course, you've got the medical practitioners that are, for instance, really busy and say they simply do not have the time to study the literature on their own, and they are simply following the guidance provided by the national bodies, and of course, unfortunately, also the international bodies are giving, let's call it, similar guidance at this stage. So all I can say is, what do you need to do if you're a patient? And I think this is what we've got in common, and all the groups that we're litigating, the AfriForum, the I Can Make a Difference doctor group, Pharma Value, the ACDP. To us, of course, and Sahari campaigning, of course, we all know about the massive campaign. It's about the patients. That it's about saving lives. You know, I always tell people, well, listen, AfriForum can make absolutely no money out of ivermectin. So what a patient can do is, of course, you and everybody, you can inform yourself. If you know a doctor, you can supply the information to them. And of course, you can put pressure on a medical doctor. Of course, we will also want to urge the medical doctors to do take the time, read the studies, or if you cannot read the studies, because and this is the irony, there's so many ivermectin studies. I actually had our research team compile me a file with all the IVM studies. I mean, it's a massive file full of studies. But even if you just look at the meta-analysis, I mean, there's now also multiple meta-analyses. So you do not have to read all the studies. You can simply look at the meta-analysis. For instance, the excellent work done by, Dr. Tess Laurie and the Evidence-Based Medicine Consultancy in the UK. And I believe if you read these things, and the thing that actually convinced me to really tackle this whole question was the work done by Juan Chamey, the guy that did the studies, for instance, in Peru. And there's now multiple examples where it was not a small randomized control trial. This was a massive rollout to the population. And I believe if you gather this information and you present it to a reasonable person, the person will come to the same conclusion. I think that the biggest or the worst thing that I've heard was a doctor telling loved ones of a patient that they only give IVM when there's basically nothing else to be done, because there's this massive possible long-term risks connected to IVM. And I was just flabbergasted. I could not think how a medical doctor can tell a patient this, because there's many things that you can tell a patient, that the WHO haven't yet recommended it, and SAPRA is not recommending it, and the Department of Health is not recommending it. Of course, you can say that. But to say that that there's possible very big long-term health risks, I'm sorry, but that is simply not true. We know that IVM is extremely safe. It's been used for decades, yes.
Absolutely. And of course, the media has played a very complicit role, mainstream commercial media, a lot of which are funded by those allied to pharmaceutical companies, to run hit pieces misinforming the general public about this medicine. A comment here from Benedicta Bergman. I've heard lately that if there's a drug on the market that cures the C word, then an emergency injection cannot be put to market. Do you know anything about this? In fact, I've also read about the same legislation. I know that it exists in America. You cannot push through the V word under emergency use authorization if a treatment exists. Any comment on this one, Mr. Emam?
Let me start off by saying, what I cannot understand is, I've just heard what Mr. Barend says. IVM has been in circulation for over 40 years, for starters. And the Japanese scientists that invented this said it is one of the safest drugs you can ever find. So safe that he goes on to say that even an illiterate person can go out there and dispense it.
Okay.
There has been no serious side effects reported in the last 40 years, with over 4 billion doses that were dispensed. And it makes you wonder, what is really the argument? So when some medical practitioner talks about long-term side effects, it really makes you wonder what is going through that particular medical practitioner. But having said that, the issue is very simple. South Africa has a crisis in terms of health care. There is extensive evidence directing us or guiding us that IVM could be very successful in dealing with the issue of COVID-19. Now, the question is, and this is what I've asked them repeatedly, what is the worst that can happen if you took IVM and it didn't help you? It will kill the worms in you. But there's no serious side effects that have ever been reported. So then what is the real issue? And I think that's what we'll come to. I'm not sure how much of time we've got, but I think we need to come to the issue. What is the reason that in the absence of any other alternative, there we have IVM, which has already proven there is success. I will agree that there's not enough research being done thus far. But the problem I have is that people like even SEPRA and others are not in a hurry to even review the data. They don't actually want to review it. And I
What's the reason for that, Mr. Emam? What is the reason? Let's just talk about it. What is the reason that IVM is being blocked by government and the media?
Sorry, Mr. Yes, I like to call a spade a spade. Now let's get to the bottom of this. First of all, I've outlined the issue of IVM, its success. I've spoken about its safety record. I've spoken about the scientists who invented it, the amount of confidence they've got, and also the evidence that have unfolded thus far. There are institutions like FDA and NIH who previously did not allow it and have now changed their mind. While they're not saying that you can use it for COVID-19, they're also not saying that you can't use it. So what does that all tell? So the question that arises is, what is the problem? Now, and that's the letter I've just written now to SEPRA to tell me what changed your mind at 2 million rand later. That's what I want to know. But having said that, first of all, there were no vaccines procured at the stage. So now what you need to do, and remember, institutions like SEPRA are funded, okay, and this is the conflict of interest, are funded by pharmaceutical companies and this industry. So how do you generally go out there and roll out IVM when in fact billions of rands have been spent worldwide on vax or V's? So suddenly when these procurements have taken place now, you've secured those procurements. You're saying, no, it's fine, you can roll it out, you know, and there's no, well, there is some restriction, but very little. So what changed your mind? So as far as I'm concerned, I think that SEPRA is conflicted. The National Department of Health says that they are a separate entity. Now the question I want to ask, then how did the National Department of Health go out there, Shabnam, and procure vaccines or vaccine in the country without even getting the approval or without even submitting an application to SEPRA? They went ahead. So where is the independence of SEPRA who just had to come and rubber stamp?
Well, those are very important, no, absolutely, very, very important points there. Barend, I want to ask you the same question, but just before that, are you aware of any law that says that if there's a treatment for the C word, then the emergency use authorization of the V word cannot go through? It is the case in America. Have you seen anything in South African law that says that?
Shabnam, I haven't looked for that because, you know, in our case, we simply focused on, of course, there's places where the injections, where there's some real progress. The fact is we cannot, you know, we cannot daydream and we cannot live in the clouds. Our reality is that it will take a very long time for the injections to reach the general population. It's a simple fact. And that means we need to make an alternative plan. And that alternative plan is IVM. So no, we did not even try to find something like that. We simply worked to get IVM more accessible. The question on the why.
Same question that I've asked, why is IVM being blocked? What is going on, Barend?
Yeah, of course, it's a difficult question to answer. Of course, I believe there's multiple answers. The one might be that you've got regulatory authorities that are overtly cautious. And so you see them in some places, and this is the irony, places where the drug is known, that countries are more likely to approve it, and we've seen it. The countries where it's really unknown, or the regions, you see actually great resistance to it. And unfortunately, this is, for instance, most of Europe and the USA. It's because they do not really, especially Europe, it's basically completely unknown. Then, unfortunately, I believe in South Africa, we've got a specific problem, and that is, one should ask the question, what is SAPRA about? Now, if you would ask me that question, I would say SAPRA is supposed to be about the safety of people. That's how I would answer it, because what is the purpose of SAPRA? In my mind, the purpose of SAPRA is to ensure that medicine that are made available to South African citizens are safe. So that's the point. My problem is if I look at the conduct of SAPRA, I see regulating for the sake of regulating. So unfortunately, I believe there's I do not know, a loss of purpose maybe. And I mean, we've got a government that are very dysfunctional, and unfortunately, that's just another one. Then there's, of course, another reality, and that is if you've got commercial force. Of course, commercial force is a reality that you cannot ignore. And if you are a commercial company and you are profit-driven, of course, you put a lot of money. And of course, if you're talking about something like pharmaceutical products, it's a massive amount of money. Of course, you can mobilize that power that it gives you, I mean, to fund massive randomized control trials, to negotiate with governments, and to get your products, let's call it, into the open and get it approved. With something like IVM, the simple fact is that there is no commercial force behind IVM. And then one should ask the question, so who should be the force behind IVM? Now, one possible answer is, well, since there will be no commercial force behind something like this, on behalf of citizens, government should be that force behind alternatives, okay? Now, of course, that might be the case, and it's a logical argument, but at AfriForum and the broader solidarity movement, of course, we believe in the principle of communities taking responsibility for themselves. And that's why we say, well, another very logical route to take is for communities to organize and to mobilize and to say, well, for us, there is no commercial purpose, but we believe there's a real benefit for citizens, for our well-being. So we organize and we mobilize to achieve this. Now, of course, that still cannot explain this very big resistance. Unfortunately, I believe there's also, it almost feels like there's some things that are in fashion and some things that are not in fashion. And if you are speaking about things that are not in fashion, then you are simply excluded or silenced. I'm truly concerned about, if a medical doctor, working in a public hospital in South Africa, a prominent person, if their social media accounts are shut down because they are simply pointing out facts, I'm definitely concerned. If mainstream newspapers focuses on one study, a poor study, published on IVM, and they do not mention any other study, then of course I am concerned. And all it tells me is this is where the public needs to step up, communities need to step up, we need to organize, we need to mobilize. And in the end, I actually believe this is a very big opportunity for the balance to be restored. If you say there's three power centers, you've got government, you've got commercial interests, and you've got community interests. If we get the communities organized and mobilized, we can restore the power balance that there should be.
Absolutely. Mr. Emam, let me ask you this question. In terms of Parliament, which parties are on board for vitamin I as a preventative and as a treatment and as early treatment so that people don't have to go and die in our hospitals, which are in themselves in a state of crisis? Which parties are on board with you and not putting up with this gatekeeping that's happening in these portfolio committee meetings?
Well, Shabnam, let me start off by saying when I did the first letter and when I got no response from SAPRA and the National Department of Health, and then threatened them with a legal letter, and then we created an alternate parties, and the ACDP and the Freedom Front and the Democratic Alliance to some extent had also come on board, and it was just the few of us that were then working together, and we were very consistent in trying to put up a fight in Parliament, and we found there was resistance from the National Department of Health. Even in our portfolio committee, we were experiencing challenges, and the easiest thing to come back and say repeatedly, of course, well, there's not enough evidence, there's not enough evidence. There's not enough evidence that the vaccines will work in South Africa. in any case right up to now. So I mean, we've gone through this many a times. And the other thing is this, Mr. Barend there was correct is when he said that SEPRA might be wanting to be very cautious. But then why were you not cautious with the vaccines and the vaccines? Well, why are you not cautious about that? Because you've allowed it to be procured without you even approving it, without even a Section 21 application or anything of that sort. So where was the safety of our people when you allowed these things and then just come back and rubber stamp it? And what happened? Where were you when we found that the stuff that arrived in South Africa, the airport, was already expired, about to expire? Where were you? Where were you? Were you not part and parcel of this entire process? If you care about the health of the people in this country, and that is what your responsibility is of, then you must take responsibility for what's happening. How do you allow anybody to secure or procure a product of this nature, a drug, and then suddenly you find it's a problem, but you were nowhere in the picture, and then suddenly you come with the Section 21 and you say, no, you can make the application long after you procured it when it was already arriving here. So you can see, but when it came to IVM, your stance is completely different. Now, right now, I've heard the minister said to us that FDA is talking about that you must not roll out the J&J vax, must put it on hold. It's the same FDA that said that IVM, they don't have a problem with IVM at home. Before they objected it, now they don't object. So why are you not consistent when you want to also accept the evidence of what FDA is saying or what the World Health Organization is saying? The World Health Organization is saying, and I want to repeat this, they are saying there is enough evidence, not enough, but we need to deal with it and we need to go and explore that avenue. So why are we not taking advantage of that as well? So, from Parliament perspective, I think there are a few of us in political parties that are trying to push ahead with it, but there's a lot of, particularly with the National Department of Health, not coming on board and doing something about it. And remember, SEPRA is a sub-entity of the National Department of Health. So where's the independence? Right. Where's the independence funded by all the pharmaceutical industries? With IVM, excellent, which is one of the cheapest drugs in the world.
Absolutely. And before we get more in depth into the injections, there's one more question I have for both of you, which is, what is the way forward? Because currently there is no access, especially for the poor and the working class who, one, don't know about IV, two, have been misinformed about IV, and three, cannot afford to go to a doctor and get to a compound pharmacy or go via a Section 21 process. What is the way forward for equitable and urgent access? Barend, let's start with you.
Yeah, Shabnam, we of course agree that is the route that we should take. Of course, if you look at countries where IVM is really implemented with success, it is countries where you can get it over the counter, or where the government actually went and they handed it out. So that's definitely where we need to go. For me, step one is to make our data better. And I just want to say, so in my mind, there is no reason to do any study to show that IVM works. Okay, you do not have to do that study. That studies have been done. We know that it works. But of course, what we can do is things like dosing studies. And of course, if you do dosing studies, it will also help to give doctors certainty, because currently, if somebody asks the doctor, please prescribe IVM to me for prophylaxis, they can say, well, okay, we're going to use a protocol from the FLCCC from the USA, but we do not have local information. So to me, that is a very important first step, to do for medical doctors locally, to do some local data gathering, specifically on dosaging. And of course, if we've got local dosaging requirements available, the doctors will gain confidence, and the use will increase. And of course, I believe if you've got that, and of course we need to continue to inform, I actually believe that we will then be able to swing the recommendation, because we need to remember, if we want to get to a point where we have rollout of this product, we will need a recommendation for the use against or for prevention of COVID-19. So in my mind, that is the critical things that we now need to do, but that is definitely the point we need to aim for.
All right, thank you very much for that. Mr. Emam, what's the way forward to make sure that the poor and the working class have access to IVM? Do we need to go back to court?
I think it's people, people, and people again. I think you need, 27 years later in this country, I think our people have got a raw deal. Let us be very honest about it. And we're not just talking about IVM and in the health sector, but if you go in totality in the entire government departments that we have today, there is a crisis. And that's why I want to thank AfriForum. Very often you are taking certain matters to court and things which unfortunately we should not be doing, but somebody has to do something about it. And I think until the people start rising and demanding what is rightfully theirs, things are not going to change in this country. I've heard you earlier on talking about the issue in Ugu. The only way for the people of Ugu is to go out to that district municipality and remove all those councillors and those officials. There's no other way. Nobody is willing. And if you don't separate politics from administration, you're never going to solve these problems. I can tell you, because politicians are the ones that appoint all these administrators from their own cadres and own political parties. And that's why you're not going to go any further. But coming back to the issue of this IVM, I'm quite convinced that it actually works. And I don't want to delve into why I'm so convinced that it works. And it's not only about the research and the evidence that I have seen and read through, all over the world that's coming. But yes, indeed, there is no doubt there's an absolute reluctance by SEPRA and the National Department of Health to want to even review or look at it. Now, let me tell you, the J&J vax that you've been given out here in South Africa was a trial. They had not even told the people it was a trial. So what stopped them from also accelerating the trials onto the IVMs? They were not interested in it. They don't really want to. I've even interrogated them on the fact that applications were done a long time ago. And of course, the chair of the board said that it was handed over to the CEO and nothing has happened. The CEO could not respond to that as well. So they're not in any way interested in really addressing these things. And the only way, I think, is first of all, we got to educate the people on the ground. The people, some of them are being misled. I mean, if you follow even on social media, they've been misled. Information by particularly SEPRA, and the CEO goes out there and say it is not proven yet. There's no evidence this, or it could have serious side effects, like Mr. Barend has said there. Where is that serious side effects? 40 years we haven't heard about it. Then talk about it. We want to hear about it. You understand, if there's serious side effects. So they've got no interest. I think, first of all, let's communicate with the people on the ground. Let's educate them about what this is all about. Let's give them data and information and evidence of where it has worked and how it has worked, even locally where it has actually worked. Let's help our medical fraternity, because let me tell you, they are in a very difficult position. I just want to touch on one other very, very important issue here. If you take a company like McKinsey, who has been charged $70 million for promoting drugs that killed hundreds of thousands of people. Okay, what has happened to them now? They still have a presence in South Africa. If you look at the vaccines, J&J and things like that, they have been found wanting. One of them has been in terms of price increases, escalating the prices. The other one on cancer drugs. So what tells us that this is not going to be harmful? And that is why I said they are laughing all the way to the bank at the risk, at the expense of our people, because there is no guarantee it's going to work. You've placed your order, you can't cancel them. Over and above that, there's a no-fault compensation which government must pay. With the taxpayers' money, must pay back our people at a price. Now imagine that all your healthcare workers thus far has been used as guinea pigs, and most of them did not even know. There was no advertising, there was no communication, there was no information. So there is more than actually meets the eye. And I think we need education to the people on the ground, not only in the health sector, Shabnam and Mr. Ace, on very, very, very many aspects of the way the country is going at this. And I can tell you that it's going to be a disaster in a few years' time if the people on the ground don't rise and take an interest.
Absolutely. And a message from Saskia Langeveld to get into contact with the Sahari campaign, sahari.action2@gmail.com. Join the People's Medicine campaign, print the information flyers which have been translated, or distribute them, or sponsor towards the cost of printing, so that we can get information out to the people on the ground. I see we've already entered into the next part of our discussion. Of course, it's intrinsically linked, which is the V word. Let's read a couple of comments before we get into that. Kapil Ramasar, our medicine, healthcare, judicial system, and understanding of basic science are all bought and paid for by Big Pharma. We won't win on their terms because the system is set up so that they always win. Valid point there by Kapil
Sorry,
Ramasar.
Shabnam, we can't clearly hear you anymore.
Can you hear me now?
No, very, very faint.
Not very faint. Is it any better now?
I can hear you well.
Any better? Barend,
Shabnam,
you can hear me well?
I'm hearing you well.
All right. All right. We sometimes experience some technical issues on my platforms. It's par for the course, and we find ways to circumvent them. Another comment here, too many lies. That is why V is in a mess worldwide. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. Period. History will put egg on somebody's face. Watch this space. All right, let's get more into the very controversial V subject. And let's start here. Secret V deals, non-disclosure agreements. We don't know what is in those agreements. And what are your thoughts on how the Constitution is actually violated by our people, our nation, not having access to this critical information contained within these deals? I mean, for example, we know what's happened in Argentina, where the pharmaceutical companies have said, if you want our injections, you got to give us your military bases, your reserve banks, your embassies, billions and billions in cash, and change all of your laws. So if you're fraudulent or negligent, or we don't deliver, or your people get harmed, there's nothing you can do. So what are your thoughts on the violation of our constitution through secret V deals by lack of access to information? Mr. Emam.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope, can you hear me clearly though? Can you hear me clearly? Right. Okay. Well, first of all, you know, for me, the issue that there's two issues here, and you know, we've repeatedly highlighted this issue with the minister and the National Department of Health as to why are we not having a transparent process, particularly in the procurement of the V, and you know, and that first one, and the second thing, the problem that we had it. Why are we not allowing the private sector to also be involved in procuring? And despite numerous requests, we are not getting the answers we want. Until, of course, this week, when the minister appeared before us, then he gave us some information in terms of, and because we interrogated the issue, he gave us some information. And then, of course, you must remember the matter was coming up for public comment this week, in terms of this no-fault compensation and things. So I think they were put into a corner where they had no other choice. And so they have given us some limited information. But I can tell you, throughout the entire process that we've been demanding it, you know, we were not getting the information we want. So the question that arises is, why was there such a level of secrecy? But over and above that, Shabnam, there's another problem. Now, and if this is true, and what my understanding is that even the procurement of the current from Johnson & Johnson, I'm told that there was no real negotiation between the National Department of Health and the company itself, but the president himself negotiated with them. Now, I find this very, very strange. Your National Minister of Health and his entire team had very little or nothing to do with the procurement of this of these, but it was done actually by the president himself. So, you know, there is so much that is actually going on in terms of this procurement. But eventually, we've now heard with the conditions and the contract, which is not signed yet. Okay, but I think we've got a deadline now for them to sign that contract from what the minister had said. And part of that is the two most important things is, of course, the first one is the no-fault compensation. And the second thing is that we will not be able to cancel or get any refund if we find that these are harmful or has any side effects or may not work. It means you can sit with millions of doses of the stuff here of no value whatsoever. So those are the two key issues that we are very, very concerned about. We've been expressing our concern there, but it appears to be a journey of no return. It's either you take it or leave it, and you've got no other option. And remember, there is no guarantee these things are going to work. Okay, and from what I've heard, with the latest information that's coming worldwide, there's another variant that has now been released, which is a lot more severe than the past. And we've also heard that some of them that we have procured, okay, that it's not going to work with the V that we have got. So where do we go from here? It's to be honest with you, I think we have been put in a very difficult position. It's no win situation for us. And remember that even our people in the country are sitting with the problem. Even your healthcare workers, you were given a no option. You either take it if something goes wrong, otherwise we will not compensate you, we will not take care of you. The others, the rest of the country, if you don't take it, you can't travel anywhere, you can't do anything, so you're being held hostage all over the world. This is what it is all about.
Absolutely. Mr. Ace, to me, this is a form of state capture. Bottom line, it's through the pharmaco-military industrial complex, very cleverly and insidiously and diabolically done, but it is a form of state capture. They tried it in Argentina. By virtue of the fact that there are non-disclosure agreements in place, we don't know the terms of these agreements. For me, clearly, our health and our sovereignty are under great risk. What are your thoughts?
Shabnam, I think that the concept to me that one should start with is actually a serving leader and serving leadership. You see, it all depends how your mind works. So I'm going to give an example. You've got a company, you've got a sales representative, you've got an executive that is responsible for sales, and you've got a CEO, okay? Now imagine you've got the situation where your sales representatives close a deal with some supplier, and then his executive approaches him. He tells him, listen, what deal did you make? Oh, no, sorry, I cannot tell you because I signed a non-disclosure agreement. Then the CEO steps into the room and he says, listen, what does this deal entail? And this sales rep says, oh, sorry, no, I cannot tell you because I signed a non-disclosure. And this is, we've got it upside down. We've got it upside down. The CEO in South Africa is the citizen. That's the CEO of this place. Okay? In the end, politicians are servants. That's what they're supposed to be. They are servants. That includes the executive. So it boggles my mind to think that you've got members of the executive that sign something that they are now saying they cannot share with the legislative authority or the most important people, the citizens. Okay, so I actually believe there might be some real constitutional issues, and who knows where this will end up. We might even have something on our hands here in terms of a legal process. Then there's another very simple, practical thing, okay? And this is, if you want to convince people to do something, you need to win their trust. It's a simple thing. It's very basic. Now imagine you are just a citizen of our country and you've got an official, let's say it's the Minister of Health, he's stepping up and he says, listen, we've got this big issue we're fighting, it's called this pandemic, and we need to vaccinate to win. Okay? In my mind, what is logical is, remember, you need to convince people. You need to gain their trust. You cannot simply, because you say it, people will do it, but maybe that is saying something about the mentality of our political leaders. They think they are the top of the pyramid. There's some misunderstanding. But if you now so now you've got this situation. They're telling you, sorry, we signed a deal, but we will not tell you what is in the deal. Internationally, unfortunately, we've got many countries now stopping the use of certain vaccines. We've all heard of AstraZeneca and J&J, what happened to it. And now the government announces we will be having this compensation fund, and hopefully we can also speak a bit about the details of that document, because there's some really hair-raising things in that document. But my angle is, if I am a citizen and you are somebody that's trying to convince me of something, every single thing that the government is currently doing is throwing a shadow over this whole thing. It's not convincing me at all. We've got a deal. I'm not telling you what it is. We've got issues internationally. We're not talking about it. We're stopping it locally. Oh, we are creating this fund to compensate if something goes wrong. I'm sorry. In every normal citizen on the street, this will not convince him. They are really doing a bad job. It might be one of the worst PR campaigns I've seen in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It is. It's, if it wasn't so scary, it would be quite funny. So let's talk about these compensation schemes. Very appropriate word, the word schemes. To add travesty to this entire thing, government has put a scheme in place, or they're trying to, that indemnifies Big Pharma for claims from injuries from the injections. But instead, the people of our country will have to pay for any injuries or disabilities or deaths caused by these injections. And of course, our nation has 5 days to respond to this 5-page bill, which means Monday. Our poor and working class have not seen this document, have no access to data, have no access to email, do not understand the legalese in this bill, and they're trying to push it through. What is the way forward on stopping this insanity? Of course, being the Big Pharma being indemnified from any claims, but also the fact that our country, our nation, our people must pay for any negative consequences of the injections. Mr. Emam, can you hear us?
Yeah, very faintly, but I can come in there. Yeah, I think first of all, it's ridiculous to expect, a public participation in 5 days. And, the entire public participation process in the country is flawed, to be honest with you, because only those that can afford it and have the opportunity participate in it. But the masses, I think at least 58.5 million people in South Africa don't get an opportunity. And that's exactly what's going to happen here. And this is the 58.5 million people that are going to be most affected, particularly people in rural areas and things of that nature. So, to me, I don't think we're doing justice to it. I think it should be rejected with the contempt it deserves. The only difficulty you have is this, that government is saying, if we don't do this, we will not get the vaccines or the V's. We're not going to get it. If you're not going to get it, we can't roll it out. We're putting our people at risk. There is an anticipated third wave that is coming out. So you can see the psychological game that is being played, how it's drilling this into the mindset of the people to such an extent. You've got no option. Either you take it, either you agree to this entire process, this flawed process. If not, you're going to have to suffer the consequences. And you'll probably have us sitting back as government and saying, no, hold on, we can't do anything. You are basically rejecting it. Now, let us be honest. And we know the way we conduct ourselves in this country. In 5 days, you're definitely not going to do justice to this matter. It's either they must get most of South Africans to be able to get an opportunity to voice their opinion on this. Otherwise, it must be rejected with the contempt it deserves. That is basically what I think must happen. But you must give the people whose lives are at stake here an opportunity to participate in this process if you want to approve these things.
Absolutely. Mr. Ace, I mean, having read through that bill, Transformative Health Justice has drafted a 3-page response. It could be 20, but you're quite right. There are hair-raising provisions there deliberately put in to become another fund for looting. And this at the benefit of Big Pharma and the administrators of these schemes and funds. What are your thoughts on some of these provisions that are deeply problematic, and how do we stop them? Do we need to go to court and say, hang on, we don't agree to this, and in fact, if you don't see an alternative, we do. You may be hostage to those big farmers because they funded your political campaigns. We're not. We have an alternative. We have vitamin I, and that's what we agree to. That's what we consent to. But your NDAs and your compensation schemes, we don't. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Shabnam, I'm actually trained as an engineer, Now I can just imagine a civil engineer building a bridge and then telling people, sorry, before you go over this bridge, you need to sign an indemnity, because if I'm not going to compensate you if something happens to you when you cross this bridge. I mean, this is so ridiculous, So again, how do government think this will instill confidence in citizens? It's a very practical thing. It will not instill confidence at all. Of course, if the approach would have been to say, we do not want citizens to suffer, so government will put up something like a bridging fund so that if something happens, you get compensated, and then it is government's responsibility to get the compensation from the manufacturer, and it is not the citizen's responsibility. I mean, that kind of approach, I can say, well, that makes sense, not to burden the citizen with as a single citizen to fight a big corporation, because we know that is a very difficult thing to do. But unfortunately, if you read this thing, and of course, point one would be to say, we're sorry, we cannot comment in 5 days. You need to give us ample time to comment on this. Of course, very wrong to say that it's going to be administrated by government, because we've seen funds administrated by government. Yeah, it just ends up terribly. I mean, we can talk about the road accident fund. We can talk about the COVID relief fund. I mean, we've got ample examples to say that that's a bad idea. Then there's, of course, this thing that's simply saying you will not be able to get compensation from the manufacturers. And the question would be, will government be able to be compensated by these manufacturers? And that is the question in my mind. So it's okay to say the patient or the person that got the side effects cannot claim from them, but hopefully government can then claim from them, but we do not know. Then there's some provisions that says, well, you will be able to be compensated if you get it from a registered site. And there's some things like if it was distributed by national government. Now, I'm curious, because does this mean if we go to a place where private companies, let's say in medical schemes, finally manage to distribute and procure these injections, and it gets administered to their members, does this mean that these members will not be able to get compensation at all if there's some side effects? Because how the document is currently written, in the way that I understand it, it basically says this will only apply to injections procured and distributed by government. I mean, this is just a few of the examples. Yeah, really, and I mean, my question would be, what this is, yeah, I do not even know what to say. Hopefully we get lots of people mobilizing, giving comments, and I would most certainly motivate people to not only indicate the issues they've got with this specific bill, but they also need to say we need more time to respond. And Shabnam, I just want to also agree with something that both of you have said. There is no such a thing as government money. There's no such a thing. The only thing that exists is taxpayer money. It's our money.
Right.
And my question would be is, are the manufacturers of these products, are they making a profit on these products? Because if you're making a profit, of course, you've got a chance that you can make a profit. But of course, with profit there's always risk. Now, if you want to take the profit, you must also be responsible for the risk. And that is why I'm wondering, is there some, I do not know, a behind the curtains deal where government have got some kind of a deal to be compensated again if they first compensate the individuals? So lots of issues with this piece of paper.
Lots and lots of issues. We're the boss, we're the CEO, we're the people in power. Nothing can happen without our consent. Government has pushed through, at the behest of multinational corporations, all sorts of laws and regulations during this lockdown that have been a gross violation of human rights. At some point, the people have got to get up and say, stop, it is enough. Comment by Ebrahim Shaik: how can 60 million people sort this out in 5 days? Makes you wonder that the third wave is locked and loaded. Pay for the V or die. That's basically the option they're giving us, except we know that it is a false option, because there are other options for treatment. We didn't need to sign up for what they're telling us. We don't even have the fiscus to be able to afford the claims that are going to arise. All right. Last question before I let you two go. How important is the role of civil society in health activism, health justice, and health transformation? Mr. Emam.
Thank you, Shabnam. I just wanted to just say something on that last issue as well. Government is asking you to participate now in this particular process. But just imagine asking you to support something when you've just put on hold the injection that you want to roll out, with side effects reported all over the world, particularly in the United States and other countries. Even the other injection that you are now bringing in has got exactly the same problem of reports all over the country. And you asking our people to have confidence, I mean, I can't understand why even us as the government will want to sign this document when we ourselves are not certain. And there has to be more to it if you went and put a sudden halt or stop on the current injection when you're saying there's no reported cases in South Africa at all. So it really, there's something very, very sinister that's going on there, but that's the situation. But coming back to the last one, I think it is important, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. I've said it in Parliament. It's time for the people on the ground to rise. This country belongs to all of us who live in this country. We are going downhill. We're going downhill very, very fast. And I want to tell you that if people, and there's a lot of capacity in this country, I can tell you there are lots and lots of people with high levels of morals and values and integrity. Unfortunately, they're not in the mainstream politics, and they need to know and understand that no matter what you say and do, it's politicians that are making and taking the decisions. So you need to be part and parcel. We need to mobilize the people on the ground when it affects our people on the ground. No politician or political party is going to be able to act in your best interest here because they're all sitting on a comfort zone. I'm sorry, I'm a politician or a statesman, and I'm going to say it loud and clear. And that's why, I commend AfriForum for the stance that they take time and time again on many issues. You understand, because somebody has to start taking and getting people to account. So I think the biggest problem we got is here, government, and we always forget one thing, that we as politicians are the servants of the people, not the other way around. So we must not just take decisions, that is going to impact negatively on our people. And we repeatedly tend to be doing these things. We need to take a mandate from a people. You're asking us to go and take 60 million people's mandate in 5 days, which is ridiculous. But yes, we're going to go to Parliament and we're going to support it. So I think let's mobilize, let's give education to the people on the ground, let's communicate. It's tough and difficult because even the media is not supporting you in this process as much as that they should be putting the people front. But I think it's the only way to go out and getting people to come out, civil society organization. But very importantly, and I think Barend has said that earlier on, people need to know what is IVM. They need to know what is going on. They need to know about these no-claim compensation fund that's been created. And you are correct. It's not government's money. It's not the pharmaceutical company's money. This is the taxpayers' money that you're going to be paying from. And you got no certainty that nothing is going to go wrong. Already you put a halt on it. And so where are you going to get the money for that if something starts going wrong? And how much is a life worth in South Africa anyway? So yes, I think it's the time for the people to rise. People need to be educated. They need to know and understand what is going on, and they need to play a more pivotal role in bringing about this change. If they're not going to do it, don't expect it to come from government.
Absolutely. The power of the people is stronger than people in power. Barend, before I turn that last question to you, I must let you both know that there are indeed cases of people who've taken the injections experiencing adverse effects in our country that are being hidden, lied about, and censored. Here's a doctor who said today that a nurse presented to me with adverse effects post-V. When she tried to report to J&J, they told her to go to her doctor. No adverse effects were recorded at all, and no follow-up was given to her. Then there's another matter of a nurse who had her left side of her body, I believe, in stroke, and that story started to circulate. And the next thing is that nurse has disappeared. Nobody knows where she is. And that's not the only one. There are nurses who are saying we are experiencing these adverse effects. And government, in the pockets of Big Pharma, aided and abetted by commercial media, are lying to the people. So we have a humanitarian disaster on our hands. Last comment here from Kapil Ramisa. The entire system is corrupt, geared towards ill health and complete control over the masses. We need to turn the table soon before the masses are damaged beyond repair. Barend, how important is the role of civil society in health, in transformation, in taking our power back?
Shabnam, of course, really important, but I think there is a right way to do it. And the right way to do it is to organize and to form institutions. Now, AfriForum is an institution like that. Of course, Sahari is an institution like that. And so if you form an institution, and an institution is basically an organization where you connect people and you pool the resources. And of course, then you get the actual ability to do something and to make a difference. In South Africa, and this is maybe an ironic situation, but because we've got a government that that is failing on multiple levels. Communities are stepping up and they are organizing, they are forming these institutions. So I actually believe that internationally, we might be at the forefront with the organizing of communities. We've got international people speaking to us and they are asking questions about how do you organize communities. And I've mentioned it before. We need to remember there need to be a healthy power balance between the commercial sector, between communities, and between government. And the only way for citizens to ensure a power balance is for the citizens to bind together into these community institutions. And of course, these institutions can again combine forces to bring a balance of power. And just let's talk. I just want to just touch again on adverse effects. So the question is, what is the real issue here? And I'm going to again say, I think maybe it's simply extremely poor performance. So we would not be having this discussion if there was an excellent adverse event reporting platform, if it was really transparent, if there was a South African adverse event platform I could easily access and I could quickly check. And of course, we know that in the United States, for instance, you have this available. In the UK, you have this available. The WHO actually have got something like this, where you can simply go onto the internet and for any day up to that point, you can draw a report and you can see what's going on. And so what can civil society do? Civil society can approach SAPRA again and say, SAPRA, you've got a responsibility to be transparent and to simply do what you are supposed to do and to perform well. And the one function that you need to perform is to provide information to the public, also with regards to side effects. And so again, I would say our big problem actually is that we do not know. And we do not know because the organization that is supposed to make it easy for us to know, they are not doing it. They're not making it easy. And so what is happening? There's a lot of questions hanging in the air. You tell us about 2 cases, but I mean, we do not know. Is it only 2 cases or is it 200 cases or 2,000? We do not know. So sometimes, one way to say it, there's something evil. And the other way to say it is we've got just people simply not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And the only way to convince them to do that, of course, is for communities to mobilize. And we can also get to a point where you get communities that are organized so well that they say, well, if there's no official reporting system, let's create our own community-based, community-funded reporting system.
That looks like the way we'll have to go, Barend, because we know of a very senior doctor who's approached SAPRA and said, listen, these are the adverse effects that frontline workers are experiencing, only for SAPRA to completely ignore the senior doctor. So certainly there could be hundreds, if not thousands, of adverse reactions. But of course, the messaging to our frontline workers and to the general public is that the injection is safe. So if they're even experiencing anything, they're not associating it with the injection. And they don't have a credible, transparent, well-publicized system to report. Meanwhile, Big Pharma and the banks laugh all the way with their pockets full at what is going on to the people of our country. But the message ultimately is that we need to unite and we need to take back our power. I want to say a massive thank you to Ahmed Mansoor, Sheikh Emam, the Honorable Parliamentarian with the NFP, and Barend, a senior researcher with AfriForum, for joining us on This Is Africa today. We look forward to engaging you again on other matters concerning health justice in our country and other matters affecting the people of our nation. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Shabnam.
Thank you, Shabnam. Thank you, Barend.
Thank you very much. We'll say good night to both Mr. Emam and Mr. Ace. Well, that's it. That's the end of our show. This is Africa this evening. We hope that you have enjoyed some robust conversations. Be sure to share this broadcast across all your platforms so people have access to information. Of course, our first interview with Kesin Raman talking about parent-child alienation, the trauma, the mental health issues, and how we need to change the family law system. Followed by Ebrahim Shaik talking to us about the water crisis in Ugu, who benefits, how is the community mobilizing, and how can we as civil society assist, get involved, and support what is a basic human right, which is the right to water. And of course, the last interview being with Barend Ace and Honorable Emam on the issue of secret injection deals, no-fault compensation schemes for injuries, and of course, continuing to advocate and mobilize for vitamin I. Thank you, Maria Pestana, for saying your comment. Thank you for this information, Shabnam and team. Spread this far and wide. God bless you all. Renata Advocat says, just in, Sapra has lifted the pause on the J&J injection. Isn't that interesting? And the last comment goes to Dr. Evie Rapiti, one of our favorite doctors who is affiliated with THJ and Sahari, who says, people who have received the injection have not been advised or given a number to report adverse effects to. So how is the manufacturer's injection assessing the safety of the injections? We are not being told the truth. But the power of the people is stronger than people in power, and we shall continue and persevere until we have what is our basic right in our country and around the world. Thank you very much for joining us on This is Africa. Good night and God bless.